What a coincidence. Back-to-back last con civilizations. So number 3 on my B tier, we have the Cumans. A civilization that was incredibly overpowered on release, and then was kind of nerfed into utter oblivion, and now they've been rebuffed to the point where I think they are pretty decent, although I wouldn't say they're like absolutely dominant for Arena. And so what this civilization has going for it that's pretty unique is the fact that they can build a second TC in the feudal age. So they can kickstart, maybe you can advance on a really fast uptime, like maybe between 20 and 22 villagers. Put down your your additional TC, boom up a little bit, get to castle age, and just finish off your boom, like the last maybe 4 or 5 minutes of your boom in the castle age, and just get to the imperial age. Although I'm not entirely sure if how much better of an economy that makes it, but the few times I have tried that out, it did seem to be a bit of a stronger economy overall. So that definitely is a really nice touch for the civilization. And also being able to build battering rams as well as capped rams in the feudal age and castle age respectively can open up the possibility for you to be able to be really aggressive with the civ as well. I'd say they're definitely one of the better pushing civilizations out there because of that. Also, their late game, really nice, really good stable with Hussars, Paladins, even Steppe Lancers. They have been improved a little bit. I'm not entirely sure if they're still the most viable unit currently, but they've at least been improved. It's definitely a consideration in some situations. They also have pretty decent siege, although they did lose siege engineers in one of their earlier patches, which is a bit of a bummer for their siege rams and siege onagers. Yeah, it's just they also really decent infantry as well. So yeah, just overall, the civilization does quite a few things well. Unfortunately, their archery range isn't the best because due to lacking arbalest, also missing bracer at the blacksmith. Although it is made up for, but the fact that their Kipchak unique unit has definitely been improved, and it's definitely a unit to consider in the late game as well. It can just be a very difficult unit to deal with for a lot of civilizations. Also, my main gripe with the civ is, again, like the Bulgarians and Ethiopians before them, just lacking very good monks, and also the fact that I think they're very weak to PAL pushes in like early Imperial Age, because they don't have the best archers. And they're very dependent on cavalry for like the backbone of their army, and that's definitely a theme across a lot of different cavalry civilizations for Arena. They're just going to be naturally, just intrinsically more vulnerable to halberdier pushes than your average civilization. You want to go for those units, but if you do, you'll either outright die, or you will struggle a lot against a player with a civilization that has really good halberdiers. So just watch out. And also it kind of extends to the fact that their defensive capabilities are pretty weak. They can't build their own stone walls, very similar to Goths. They don't have any tower upgrades at all, so against very strong like mid-game aggression, they also may struggle a little bit. You definitely don't want to be on the defensive with this civ in my view. So, but other than those two things, I'd still think they are overall just a very good Arena civilization, although I wouldn't say they're top. Number 4 in my B tier, we have the Saracens. An overall decent Arena civilization in my view. They have a ton of options that are just at their disposal. Great archers, decent infantry, decent cavalry. Overall, a decent unique unit, the Mameluke in certain situations. Great siege, great monks. It's just kind of held back by their lack of very good economy bonus. The market bonus, it is a nice touch for the civ, and it's definitely bailed me out of a ton of bad situations. But overall, other than that, you're not really looking at much of an eco bonus, and lacking some things in your tech tree like halberdiers can be a problematic against certain civilizations. So these two things I'd say are the things that kind of make me say this civilization is kind of meh. Sorry Tato and anyone else out there that just likes to pick, just for whatever reason likes to pick Saracens a lot, but kind of feel like I'm kind of crapping on your civ in some ways, but it's just how I feel about it. It's just nice and solid, but there are better arena civilizations. Following Saracens, we have the Mayans as number 5 in my B tier. So Mayans, it's a really interesting civilization where because they're so strong, so flexible, and so dominant from like the early to mid game because of their cheaper buildings. They don't need as much wood to build their buildings. They also have a really solid, pretty decent boom in the mid game as a result, and a pretty wide, flexible tech tree for the most part. It can really help them out, I'd say, all the way up until around early Imperial Age or so, where something like their Farimba Cavaliers, like their 12+7 Farimba Cavaliers, can make for a really nice opening there. I think the problems, and they also have really good monks to boot. They have gunpowder access. They have champ scarls, champions that have very high pierce armor. It can be nice in certain situations. I'd say the issue with this civilization comes out when you go beyond early Imperial Age, where this civilization, in my opinion, falls off a cliff, like a huge cliff, where you don't. Next up on my B tier, we have the Koreans, my people, yay! They've definitely been improved quite a bit ever since Kingdoms, and since DE, because now their military units that don't include siege units all cost 15% less wood. That helps out their arbs, their skirms, their halbs, although to a small effect. Although it really is helpful for their war wagons if you see yourself going for that unit. Not necessarily the easiest unit to get up. Not necessarily the easiest unique unit to get up and running, but it's definitely been made easier as a result of that. On top of that, fantastic late game, some of the best siege onagers in the game. You have halbs, you have arbs, you have full gunpowder access, including bombard towers, which are unlocked for free as soon as you get chemistry. It's just a really nice touch. It can help you secure map control or just help your push. And also, what I really like about this civ is the fact that even though they're a little bit slower to get up and running because their eco is a little bit on the generic side, they're also really consistent. What I mean by that is, Koreans is a civ that you're going to be very reluctant to try and push because they get free access to guard tower. Just generic enemy aggression is just not going to cut it. Like a smush is going to be shut down almost instantly because of those guard towers. One of the best ways to stop a smush. If you want to try and push Koreans, like, you need to have a very strong mid-game presence, like any of the gunpowder civilizations like Turks, Spanish, or Portuguese is just one example. And so they're slower, but they're pretty consistent. You can most of the times at least get up to the late game where they can get out some of their strong options. A little bit dependent on gold, and because onagers, gunpowder, war wagons, they're all really heavy on gold, and the Korean trash is really nothing to celebrate over. They're the dishonorable mention is probably their Hussars, which are like absolutely bottom tier, lacking bloodlines, lacking blast furnace, lacking plate barding. The cavalry in general just sucks. Their infantry is also not as good as it can be because they also miss blast furnace, but they do at least do okay in like pretty much. And also their monks are kind of bad as well, lacking redemption, illumination, atonement, those things, and also lacking heresy. So this civ can be a little bit vulnerable to monks, to very good monk civs, because their best units are also all about being pop efficient and expensive, and you're losing them to conversions. That's just devastating. But otherwise, I still do think they've been improved ever since D's release with their new military bonus, and overall, it's a civ I'm not unhappy to see for the most part, unless I have like a really bad match. Following the Koreans, we have the Chinese, a civ that went through some really interesting changes these last couple of patches, where for whatever reason the developers decided to give them they decided to give them block printing, basically removing their only real weakness in the late game, which is like onagers and siege onagers. It was really the one and only like surefire way to be able to clear out mass groups of their unique unit, the Chukonu, just one of the strongest and deadliest ranged unique units in the game in terms of like just raw DPS. but it has been counterbalanced by the fact that in the most recent patch they did lose redemption, so that weakness finally returns, and rightfully so in my view. They have an okay boom with their their discounted technologies that they get cheaper as you advance through the ages. That can help you across like almost anything that you're doing. If you wanted to just boom to the late game, you're helped out in the boom, just making your eco techs a little bit cheaper. And like early Imperial Age, you can upgrade whatever units you're going to be pushing with a bit easier. Like because again, the cheaper technologies bonus extends to military technologies as much as it does eco technologies as well. Really good unique unit, the Chukonu. It's a really fun unit to play around with. It just rolls over literally almost anything that isn't like a siege onager. So unless your civilization or at bare minimum has like onagers with siege engineers, I think Chinese is going to be a civilization that those kinds of civs really struggle with. Saying their issues come in where they're again very weak to like onagers and siege onagers. So that's like a nightmarish unit for the Chinese to be up against, like Halb and Siege. If your opponent gets up to that, the Chinese just absolutely fall apart. There's almost nothing that they can do against that. So it's a needed weakness just to counterbalance the fact that their Chukunu are so strong, but it nonetheless is a very noticeable weakness as well. Chinese, in my view, are just not very well suited for these closed sorts of maps. They definitely excel more in like the open land maps, where they're good economy, and like just having more space to run around means that their onager weakness is for the most part kind of negated. But for Arena in particular, that weakness is amplified, and that's mainly the reason why I don't really consider the Chinese to be the best civilization. They're okay, but they have some very clear bad matchups and very clear weaknesses. Following the Chinese, we have the Persians, a civ that I put in D tier in my last tier list, and they've certainly been getting a lot of praise amongst the pro community anyways, because now that their TCs work a little bit faster and Dark Age 5% faster, you can effectively get anywhere from like 1 to like 1.5 more villagers just in terms of like time saved in like your Dark Age, like your build in general. And that, coupled with the extra starting resources that you have, can make for a really nice early game with the Persians. On top of that, they have really good cavalry, they have gunpowder access, they have halbs, pretty nice, pretty decently wide military tech tree. So you do have quite a few options at your disposal, but unfortunately, I'd say where the civilization still is lacking is, one, their monks are terrible. Like, they are easily a bottom 3 monk civilization, and probably the worst, probably the bottom up among those 3 as well. I'm thinking of civs like maybe Mongols and Vikings, maybe Celts too. You can kind of like, those are like kind of interchangeable for the most part. Yeah, Persians are basically the worst out of those bunch as well, most likely. They also will really struggle against like one of the more common army compositions in a closed map like this, like Halb and like infantry and siege, specifically Halb and siege. Being so heavy into cavalry, and like your BBC aren't the best as well. You miss siege engineers. You can't convert siege because your monks are terrible, so you're just gonna have to like suicide charge like a bunch of Azars, maybe even paladins, to try and try and kill off all the siege. And that's gonna be a tough task if you have like a wall of halberdiers just blocking them. But with that said, I think some of the Persians' underlying issues are fixed. Like, for example, they dependent on a lot of gold, because like, let's say they got cavalry out, like how are you going to support that? Like, your skirms aren't very good because you miss bracer. You could go hand cannoneers, but thing is, they also cost the same resources that paladins do, for example. So you just spent a whole bunch of resources upgrading and getting out paladins, and now you're going to spend more food and gold on getting out hand cannoneers. Like, that just doesn't work very well. With the addition of the Kamandaran unique technology that replaces meme oil, aka boiling oil, from the castle as the Castle Age unique technology for the Persians, they have a really nice wood dump. Now their crossbows don't cost any wood. Sorry, they don't cost any gold, so they just cost wood now. It can make for a really nice partner for your cavalry, just to kill off halberdiers. And unfortunately, yeah, Persians, very dependent on cavalry, very bad monks, and just an inability in the mid game to just do anything super productive outside of booming with their otherwise great economy. I just feel kind of limited with this civilization for the most part, and that's why I don't rate them as highly as, like, for example, as some pros might for Arena. But that's just my view. It's just my play style, and yeah, as a result, I just don't like Persians as much as I think I should. And finally, rounding out my B tier, we have the Indians, a civ that I feel like I should like more, because they seem to like excel in a lot of the different areas in the game that I consider important. For example, a really good boom with their cheaper villagers, a really nice late game with their imp camels and very good gunpowder, etc., and like an almost perfect trash tech tree, and also okay monks. They get redemption, block printing, etc. But I think in practice, that's just me talking about the Indians like on paper. I think in practice they're just a little bit lacking in quite a few areas, the most noticeable of which is that they don't have the knight line at all. In my view, no matter how strong you make a camel, it's still a camel. It can't fulfill exactly the same role as a knightline unit, as like a paladin can. So even though the Indians are quite strong in this department, the camel department, it's still not a replacement for missing the knightline, in my opinion. So that means, and lacking that, and also can give some kind of a noticeable weakness to maybe very strong archer civilizations. It's not to say that the Indians will outright die to those kinds of civs, but I think they will definitely struggle a bit, without the nightline at all, no siege rams. You do at least have fully upgraded skirms, but overall I'd say it's still a pretty noticeable weakness for the civ, and also against very good infantry civs, can give their camels a very hard time, and so most civs in the game are strong in one and at least one of those two unit types, or if not both. So I just think Indians just have so many mediocre to bad matchups that I don't really that even though on paper I consider them to be strong in almost all the all the places in the game that I consider important, it just doesn't work out as well in practice with a civ when I play them. And so overall, I mean, they're not the worst civ, obviously. They're still good enough to be in B tier in my mind, so they're still a pretty decent arena civilization. But they just have their share of problems, and there are obviously better civs out. So now we come to our last two tiers. So C tier are the civs that I consider to be, they're not particularly bad, but they're not really very well suited to arena in my opinion, and as a result they do kind of suffer on this map compared to the civilizations above them, but they definitely have their moments. They definitely have moments in the game where they're strong. It's just, I would say they have more downsides than they have upsides, and that's why I put them comparatively low. But with that said, I mean, for the most part, I think if you random any of these civs and you're up against, like, say, most of the B tier civs and like even some of the A tier civs, I think you will be fine. You may be outclassed if you roll them against a lot of the S tier civs, though, in my opinion. So starting off with my C tier, we have the Magyars, a civ that admittedly I probably overrated a little bit in my previous tier list series, and that's just because I really do like this civ. I just really like how they play out. I think it's a really fun civ to play. It's really fun to screw around with their really good cav archers and their Magyars, which is, by the way, like one of my favorite 2-unit army compositions. Like Magyars plus heavy cav archer with recurve bow can just kill so many things in the game. They just complement each other so well. But anyways, I digress. The Magyars, they have a really decent potential for taking map control because of their cavalry get the extra attack, the free attack upgrades. And so, right alongside, like, for example, a civ like Franks up in A tier, which I said was very good for taking map control, Magyars are in a similar vein. There's very few civs I think it can outright challenge a Magyar player that's trying to take map control. And of course, fantastic late game, good variety of cavalry and cav archers, but you also have foot archers, good variety of foot archers as well. You get good arbalests, fully upgraded arbalests, you get fully upgraded skirms. So this civilization, even though they like to go for cavalry, I'd say for the most part they actually are adaptable enough that they can, tailor their army compositions to deal with, even civilizations that they on paper might struggle against, like really good, like camel civs, just naturally camels counter cavalry, but they have halbs, not very good, not the best halbs, missing squires and plate mail, but they still do have them. In my book, weak halbs are still better than most pikemen against pretty much all types of cavalry, so they can at least hold their own against those kinds of civs as well. Their siege is a little middling, although they still do have a decent selection, especially now that they get siege engineers. I think where this civilization kind of falls short is the fact that they don't have a real eco bonus. They save a little bit of food on their scouts if you plan on taking map control with them, but otherwise it's not like a super impactful, super consistent and strong economy bonus. And also they die a little bit hard to like halb and siege, in my opinion, although they definitely do fare a lot better than other civilizations that rely on a lot of cavalry or cav archers, because the Magyars it's very good at taking out siege. So if your enemy's halberdiers are caught out of position for even a split second, you can basically just delete them all with Magyar Hussars. So I'd say overall it's a manageable weakness. The civilization overall is pretty adaptable, really flexible, and yeah, I don't think they do have their share of like mediocre matchups, but I wouldn't say they have many particularly bad ones. It's just lacking a real economy bonus and being kind of reliant on cavalry does make things, and also lacking good monks does make me a little bit worried for this civilization, but overall, not the worst civ in the game. Following the Magyars, we have the Vikings, a civ that is very polarizing, and what I mean by that is they have a really nice economy, but not really the late game options that they can take advantage of to make use of that economy. So Vikings, going back to the issue of their economy, one of the best mid-game booms in the game because of free wheelbarrow and handcart that they get right as they advance to the appropriate ages. And so they can be a really nice early Imperial Age civilization as well. Just boom up really fast, like an arbalest and siege ram push. Can make for a really nice early Imperial Age, push. They also have some really decent infantry, especially now that they get chieftains. They can hold their own against like really strong cavalry civs now for the most part. Berserks, I think, are actually a pretty good unique unit. I still think there are like way better unique units out there, but it's definitely really good, really resilient. It can hold its own in a lot of different kinds of melee fighting. So situational, I think it can be a really nice unit. Also, decent siege and they also get siege engineers, so siege rams, onagers, heavy scorpions, or siege engineers. They have a decent lineup there as well. I think ultimately where the civilization falls short is, again, their lack of very good late game options. Some people will try to argue that now that berserks have been improved and now that the civ gets chieftains and whatnot, that the Vikings actually have a really good late game. And I take that with a grain of salt, honestly, because it's very clear that there are better late game civilizations. Like you look at, for example, almost all of the civilizations that I have in my S tier, they all have significantly, like most of them all have significantly more pop efficient and just overall more versatile late game army compositions than the Vikings do. So when people say that they have a really good post stamp, I'd say probably I would just take or leave their their post stamp. And also the fact that I praise their arm and ram push. but it just seems like nowadays, people are just very well prepared for it. Even a half decent economy civilization that has access to onagers, they can wall up, make like, I don't know, 3-4 onagers, and they can just end up stopping that push entirely. So it's just nowhere near as strong as it used to be. And overall, like siege in general is just not a unit type that the civilization deals very well with. Like so yeah, this civilization they also don't really have the best trash out there. Their light cav sucks, and their cavalry in general sucks because they miss bloodlines and they miss plate barding armor. That's not really a unit type you want to go with in like 99% of situations. And yeah, this civ just has too many problems for me to put any higher than C tier. There are worse civs in my opinion, but there are obviously clearly better civs as well. So Vikings, definitely worthy pick for being in C. After Vikings, we have the Huns. Really similar to the Magyars as far as like army compositions go. They're all about cavalry and cav archers, although they're maybe not quite as pop efficient as the Magyars are for the late game. Their cav archers are statistically way worse, and even if they are cheaper, I tend to value pop efficiency more than cost efficiency in the late game, and say that's definitely where the Huns definitely struggle a little bit. They have a decent economy because they don't need to build houses, so that can just end up banking them a ton of wood that they can use to put into their boom. Really good cavalry, decent trash as well. They only miss plate mail as well as ring archer armor at the blacksmith, but overall they have like all the trash unit upgrades, like the unit upgrades at least. And also they have their Tarkin unique unit, which has been buffed to the point where it's a serious consideration in some situations. Like if you're facing a really good archer civ, like, Tarkins will serve you quite well in that situation because they just have so much HP and so much pierce armor. They'll just annihilate archers if they're not properly supported. I'd say the issues with Huns, I mean, it's nothing new, very reliant on cavalry. Their monks are also very bad. It can make them quite vulnerable to like very early Hal pushes, like just by virtue of being a cavalry civ. They're very lackluster in defense, where they don't have fortified walls, they don't have any tower upgrades. So just a very aggressive civilization. If they're pressuring them, the Huns I think are gonna really struggle to defend. This is the kind of civilization you really want to be taking the initiative with. You do not want to be stuck in your base as Huns. You preferably should take map control, take advantage of some of their bonuses like their faster stables or a cav archer discount. Try and secure that map control and try and keep the pressure on your opponent's base rather than fighting at your own. Because if you're fighting at your own base as Huns, you're in trouble, in my opinion. Up next, we have the Mongols. So Mongols, really nice ability to take map control with their beefed up light cav. They get 38% extra HP on that. They also interestingly got access to Steppe Lancers with since I believe two patches ago. They're not really the most. It's not really the most powerful unit in the game anymore, but I mean it's still an option that the Civ can go for. And of course, in the late game, they have their infamous Mangudai Siege Death Ball. It can just be so difficult for a variety of civilizations to deal with. And yeah, and unfortunately the civilization, and also a really nice early game, forgot to mention, with their faster hunters, has been nerfed a little bit to 40% faster as opposed to 50% faster, but it still can make for a really nice Dark Age. It can really kickstart a decent boom, even if the boom itself is a little bit on the generic side. Unfortunately for Mongols, like kind of touching on the whole eco aspect, their mid-game boom is a bit on the generic side. They're also critically weak in the early Imperial Age stage of the game, in my opinion, because, you really need like Mangudai and like their siege in order to be for this civilization to be a good late game civilization. And unfortunately, though, both of those things take a ton of time and a lot of resources to get up and running. And so, up against a really strong civilization in like the early Imperial Age stages of the game, you could get pressured out before you can get that up and running. You need thousands of food and gold to get elite Mangudai and like siege ram and like siege onager, and that's just need a lot of time that your opponent, like an equally skilled opponent, just will likely not give you. And so without them, the Mongols, they're really nothing special in my opinion. So it's just a very glaring issue with this civilization, on top of, their generic economy, they're very bad monks. So yeah, I think Mongols are definitely rightfully in C tier as a result. Following the Mongols, we have Celts at number 5 in my C tier. A civ that has a really nice economy. Faster working lumberjacks is always a really nice economy bonus at pretty much all stages of the game, except for maybe very late, where wood is not exactly the biggest concern, but it's still a really nice eco bonus. Can kickstart a really nice boom, and can make for a really nice boom as well. Of course, their late game also is very well defined by their infantry and their siege, their woad raiders, their halberdiers, their siege rams, their siege onagers, probably heavy scorpions in some situations. I'd say where this civilization is definitely held back a little bit, as in multiple facets. Their monks are very bad, some of the worst monks in the game easily. Their tech tree is just very narrow. So even though their infantry and their siege are very strong, you're up against a civ that can clamp down on those two things. Like, you are very sad as the Celts. Like, I'm thinking of a civ, like, for example, like freshest in my mind off the back of things like HC3, probably Japanese. If a Japanese player gets up to samurai, like, that's basically one of the hardest counters to Celts that I can think of. Assuming the map even is a little bit open, which, even though Arena is a little bit more of a closed map, there's still like just a decent area in the middle where you can just have a really wide engagement. And like, you're facing samurai, your infantry, the Celt infantry, are strictly worse. You will die to samurai. And of course, samurai being a little bit faster than your typical infantry units, they can micro themselves around like the siege a little bit faster and just completely tear that to shreds as well. So Celts have very clearly defined good matchups as well as very bad matchups, because they're so all in on both their infantry and their siege. And also, much like Mongols before them, they're also critically weak in the early Imperial Age stage in the game, point in the game where I consider to be quite important, because again, just like Mangudai in siege for Mongols, woad in siege just takes thousands of food and gold to get up and running, both to get the upgrades as well as the units themselves. And that's just not time that your opponent is going to give you in like the majority of games. So if you're playing Celts and you're at that point in the game, just be aware that you may have to be playing on the defensive for at least a little bit, for quite a few minutes, before you can get that death ball up and running, and pray to God that you don't get pressured out before that point. But assuming you can survive to that point, you're looking at a very strong late game civilization in a wide variety of situations. After Celts, we have Vietnamese as my number 6 for my C tier. So Vietnamese, they were dead last in my previous tier list series, but they have been improved where they now get a bit of an eco bonus where all their eco techs no longer cost any wood. So that's a decent amount of resources that you can bank up, that you can put towards your boom. Also helps out, like maybe if you're making archers, like you can take map control with them. You can save some wood to make those as well. They have a pretty decent late game with elephants, really strong archers. They have bombard cannons, bombard towers, the Imperial skirmishers, really nice trash unit for the late game as well. So overall, they have quite a decent lineup of units that they can use. I'd say where this civilization will still struggle, though, is maybe against infantry with high pierce armor. I'm thinking like Goth Huskarls especially, I think, can be a bit of a nightmare for this civilization to deal with. On top of that, you're lacking very good monks. Your infantry is nothing to write home about because you missed Blast Furnace. Your cavalry outside of elephants is also really middling. And just overall, the civilization has very clear weaknesses, but at least they're not like absolutely like across the board bad like they used to be. Like I think they can match up favorably against quite a few civilizations, and at least be able to hold their own against some others. But overall, not exactly the greatest civilization for Arena. And finally, in my C tier, we have the Mayans. It's probably the most controversial placing of a civilization throughout this entire tier list, if I had to take a guess. But yeah, I just rate them this low because they don't really fit my style of playing, and I think just from when I look at the civilization objectively, I really don't feel like this civilization its play style just lends itself very well to a more closed map like this, like Arena. So Mayans, they have a pretty decent economy with their longer lasting resources. In the past, I would say for their farms especially, this would have been a strike against them, because up until like Will of the Kingdoms, their farmers always worked a lot more slowly than those of like literally every other civilization in the game. And this meant that their mid-game boom was a bit on the anemic side. And it was just it was a pretty noticeable problem for me anyways. But ever since DE came out, interestingly enough, based on some testing I've done, their farmers actually work about as fast as any other civilization with a generic farming rate. So that's definitely at least a positive for the civilization. But then we get to the downsides. Mayans is a civilization that's definitely very dependent on mobility to carry the civilization. And, and that's why I think they're such a good Arabia civilization. Like, I play Arabia, like, whenever I land Arabia in the map pool, and Mayans is definitely one of the civilizations that I will consider because it's really strong on those kinds of maps. But on closed maps like this, more closed maps like Arena, I think they really suffer because you don't have anywhere near as much space to run around. And, Mayans being so addicted to mobility, they need to get into your economy, and they need to do damage with their eagles and plumes, very mobile units. You can't do that nearly as easily. And, without that asset at the Mayans' disposal, that asset of mobility, they're just really nothing special. And so then they really struggle against certain army compositions. I'm thinking of like Champ and Onager, like Champ and Siege Onager, things like that, where because this civilization doesn't have very good monks, therefore they can't convert the siege. They also don't have like a gold-free option to like just throw away units to try and snipe siege, because they're a Native American civ. And they also don't have gunpowder, they don't have bombard cannons, they can't take out siege from afar. So all they can do in like almost all situations is just suicide charge like 50 Eagle Warriors into like the siege, hope they don't die to like the defending units like champions or hand cannoneers, hope that you get all the onagers so that your archers can like pick off all the infantry. I think it's just not a playstyle that I particularly like, and just throwing away units like that, like especially units that cost like a ton of gold like Eagle Warriors, it just doesn't sit very well with me. So Mayans, very dependent on mobility, very weak to certain like those champion and like siege army compositions, or like gunpowder and siege army compositions, and just in general, not lending itself well to like the late game grindy situations where you're in these sorts of closed maps where you're fighting pitched battles in close quarters. The Mayans just don't shine in that setting, and that's why, in spite of like pro opinion where they would put this civilization as like one of the best civilizations for like almost any kind of like land map, I personally disagree. I think they're very good for open maps, as I've said, like Arabia, but closed maps like this, Arena, they're a no-go for me. It's just not a very good civ. And finally, we have the D tier. The civs that I wish I could put higher on this tier list, but in their current state at least, I can't really justify doing it. They just have too many problems associated with their civs themselves to lend themselves very well to Arena, to this sort of map. But with that being said, I mean, consider how long it is. It's only 3 civs. So I mean, I think that's a really good indicator for balance these days, I'd say, where you can go full random into a 1v1 arena game, and chances are you will roll a pretty decent civilization. And so that to me is a pretty good thing. But with that being said, getting into the D tier, we have the Tatars at the top. A civilization that has come under a lot of fire ever since, like, maybe the between like last patch as well as like toward maybe after the first patch of DE, because it seems like the civilization just doesn't do a whole lot that other civilizations can already do like better. Like they do cavalry well, they do cav archers well, but you know, civs like Huns, Magyars, Turks, they probably do those things better. And you know, in general, you know, if we're talking about like this civ's bonuses, I mean, you can't even make use of one of them where they have extra attack from like as a result of their elevation bonus. But you know, there's no elevations in a completely flat map like Arena, so basically one out of I believe it was 3 civilization bonuses are automatically tossed out of the window for Tatars, and that's not a good sign. They do at least get Thumb Ring and Parthian Tactics for free. It can make going for like crossbows in the mid game kind of a lot nicer, and also getting Cav Archers up and running either in the mid game or late game a bit nicer, because that's just resources that you're saving. But you know, overall, there's just this civ just doesn't have much of its own identity. They do have some like some decent options, but again, there's just they're all things that other civs can do well. That can do better. And of course, touching on the Tatars, I mean, I think one of their key weaknesses is again kind of similar to like Mongols and Celts, like in the tier above them. They just feel very weak in early Imperial Age based on like the number of times I've played them, where they don't have arbs. Their halberdiers are bottom tier, and so it's like a cavalier or bust opening basically, and that can result in you having a very exploitable weakness to halb pushes, and you can just have a really bad time at that point in the game. I will say though that it seems Cav Archers is probably a bit easier to get up and running than it is for a number of other civilizations with the Tatars, because again, free Thumb Ring, free Parthian Tactics, those are all resources that can go into other things, so you can get that unit up and running quicker. But overall, I think it's safe to say that it's still, that point in the game, or early imp, is still a pretty weak point for this in the game for the civ. And overall, this civ, lacking much of any kind of identity, it just doesn't lend itself that well to Arena, in my view. I don't like this civ too much. Number 2 on my D tier, we have the Berbers. A civ that, honestly speaking, I don't really think has a whole lot going for this map. I think the only real time this civilization shines is maybe in the mid game, if you decide to take map control, or maybe you're kind of shifting to try and put some pressure on your opponent, where you can kind of take advantage of the civilization's cavalry discount to help you pump out some more knights or more light cav to try and like back up your siege to make a more threatening push. That's pretty much like the only point in the game that I can really think this civilization shines. And maybe post-Imperial Age, but I mean, there's still like way better post-Imp civs in my opinion. They also don't really have much of an eco bonus to speak of. Faster moving villagers is not really that impactful across any facet of the economy. And also they're pretty cavalry dependent, meaning they're critically weak to like halberdier pushes in the late game, or like early Imperial Age, so you really got to watch out. You really have to be conscientious of that weakness if you're playing this civilization, and your opponent has a civ that has access to halbs and at least has a decent economy to go along with it. And finally, coming in dead last in my overall Arena tier list, as well as last in my D tier, we have the Goths. There's not really a whole lot to say about the Goths. I mean, I think everyone knows this civ like well enough and its downsides. No real eco bonus, bad monks, you know, terrible defensive potential, not being able to build their own stone walls, no tower upgrades, and also being a very predictable one-trick pony in the late game, where it's basically infantry spam or bust with this civ. And yeah, they struggle in like very late game, where because infantry is not really the most pop efficient unit out there, and they can end up getting pressured out by a lot of really dominant like mid-game and like early civilizations, because the Goths need a lot of resources to get their infantry spam up and running. And even then there's still counterplay to that kind of army composition, that kind of strategy. So overall, I mean, Goths in their current state, they just don't have a whole lot to offer on this map, or really most maps. I think they can definitely use a bit more tweaking. I know the devs are kind of experimenting with how to buff Goths, where they seem really weak before, and then up until like 2 patches ago, they were deemed like OP because now they can't. Although that's probably lend itself more towards like open maps where it's a bit harder to wall, where they can just like drush you super quickly because their infantry are so cheap and then just ruin your day. Even taking that into consideration, I mean, you can't really do that on Arena, at least not very easily. So lacking any sort of like really relevant things that can help them on this particular map, I think is what really holds the Goths back. And yeah, it's just not a civ I particularly enjoy playing. And with that, that will be the end of my updated 1v1 Arena tier lists video series. A lot shorter this time, just 2 parts instead of 5. I kept the commentary a lot more streamlined this time as well. Hopefully you learned something. I mean, hopefully, if you agree with me, then if you agree with this tier list, great. If you don't agree, then you're free to disagree. I think Arena, more than many other types of maps, really lends itself. The civ standings on this particular map can kind of depend on like one's playstyle. Like I have like my own kind of playstyle where I like flexibility, a good late game, good eco if it can be helped, is also a nice bonus. But just a civilization that can like give me some good options for like either the mid game, the late game, and the late game are usually the civs that I rate very highly, as opposed to the civs that kind of pigeonhole me into a certain kind of playstyle. So this was my tier list, and just my subjective opinion, my own take on it, and hope you enjoyed. And until next time.